Rachel, this is Love Me in the Library, and I'm filming another vlog. Surprise, surprise. I'm currently reading I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy, which seems to be the hot book of the moment. Everyone's reading it because, you know, iCarly was such a hit phenomenon. Everybody knew about it if they didn't watch it, and Jennette McCurdy was one of the lead actors on that show. And since it was such a beloved series, for her to come out with this very shocking novel that is not just shocking because it's about her relationship with her mom, but also revealing secrets about what really was going on in Nickelodeon Studios is quite fascinating, especially given that she was given hush money, or the opportunity to accept hush money at some point that she turned down to actually speak up about what was happening. So needless to say, I am one of the very many excited people who really wanted to read this book, and I was fortunate enough to receive an ARC for it. So I will be reading and reacting to what's going on in this book. So far I am about 2.5 chapters in, and I will say there's some things here that I think are, lending the perspective of like empathy towards Jennette's mother, because she was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer when Jennette was 2, but also showing you the cracks in the relationship quite early on without commenting on it, which when we look back at something, it's very easy for us to point out that's the problem, that's what's wrong right there. I appreciate for these things to be presented to the reader for you to make your, for you to pick up on what's happening, essentially. We see that her mother was diagnosed with this terrible illness, but on top of that, she also, after overcoming the cancer, at least for this first time I assume, she also has a VHS tape of when she was first diagnosed and taken to the hospital, and she plays the VHS tape like all the time, and she will commentate on it and say like, oh, here's this part where this person was so overtaken with tragedy about what happened to me that they had to leave the room, and it was so noble of them to feel so bad for me, but look at Jennette, and she couldn't stop singing Jingle Bells at the top of her lungs. I can't believe that she didn't understand how grave of a situation this was. It was so terrible of her. And meanwhile, Jennette was again 2 years old, so she didn't understand what was going on, and as a child who was suddenly taken to a strange environment, behaving that way is really not that absurd. What's really absurd is to take a videotape of you having been diagnosed with cancer and to like put everyone through a continuous trauma of it. Jennette's brothers were also quite young at this point, like her siblings were like 8 and 15, so all, like, regardless, bad ages to be doing this to somebody, but especially because they're your children, they look up to you as a parent. So that's absurd, and I think that was in like chapter 1, so you already kind of have an idea that this is not the most functional perspective or relationship here, to have kind of made this moment all about her. There's also, I didn't know this, the McCurdys were also Mormons. They didn't used to go to church or be involved with any of this until they needed something from God, supposedly. So I get that a lot of people kind of like have their come to Jesus moment and they become religious when certain bad things happen. Some of those communities are not the best to be involved in, so I wonder if that will have any kind of influence over the other things that we'll learn about in this memoir. Of course, we also get to hear about Jennette's life as a young child actor and how this was always her mother's dream and it was pushed onto her. So with all of this out of the way, I'm going to continue the vlog from here. I don't really want to get into, spoilers to the degree that people are not going to read the book anymore, because I think it's quite good, and I think something like this would be worth reading for anyone who's interested in it. So I would, like to share my thoughts along the way, but I won't get into explaining every single aspect of the book. And I'll give you my updates after I get a little bit further in the book. Also, I don't know how I just forgot this. I should say that this book includes talk about an eating disorder, because while Jennette's mother is in a coma, everyone is coming forth with stories to hopefully shock the mother enough to wake up the way that they do in movies. And Jennette's big thing is, hey mom, I finally got down to 89 pounds like you always wanted me to. And she's so sure that this is going to be the news that her mom wants to hear, because this is so often what she's been pushed for and what she's been told she needs to be, that she kind of like sits back like, yeah, I did it. My mom's totally gonna wake up now with this thought in mind, and the idea that maybe this isn't gonna work, the fact that maybe her mom won't wake up, is now suddenly pushing her in a direction of wondering, what am I supposed to be without my mom? Because we've been so tied together, our identities have been so closely knit from the beginning, because so much of what my existence has been is to make my mother happy. And I think this is also really exemplified in the first chapter when she talks about her birthday and how she suddenly feels like she has this power for her birthday wish and what she uses it for. And all I'm going to say is it feels like it's really hitting home with certain things that I've experienced in my own relationships with stuff. So that's probably the reason why like this is really resonating a lot with me. It's not just, oh, the writing is really good, and which is true as well, but also like the things she's talking about are very specific, and the details that she's giving are obviously things that she specifically experienced, but they feel like they touch on the same kind of universal ideas with childhood trauma and things that generally are just recognizable, to just feel a certain way that you are responsible for other people, that you are responsible for their happiness, and that you must make those sacrifices yourself to keep the peace even. So the things that she talks about in her family home and things like that, even just in the first 2.5 chapters, has really very much been resonating. And that's partially why I'm like, this is very good so far. This is already very, very good. From hanging out with friends tonight. We went out for some tofu pot at this tofu house place that is really, really good. It was fantastic. We went shopping really quick and popped over to a dessert spot as well. So it was a very nice little evening. And then I came home and I was listening to more of the audiobook on the drive there and back. A lot of young women have troubled relationships with their parents, especially with their mothers. And sometimes that pain is so, it's so present in your life that you find it so hard to look past it, and it defines so much of who you become, maybe who you thought of yourself as. And some of that is from the definitions of a person that raised you and gave you certain ideas about life because you looked up to them. And I find that I really, really gravitate towards stories that involve a mother-daughter relationship. It's sort of interesting how we seek out media in order to identify with it, especially in the case of a memoir where someone is talking about their real experience as well. And I don't know if maybe this is just me feeling like listening to this memoir and going like, shit, like this is intense, and has also given me new ideas about how helicopter parenting actually works. I don't have helicopter parents. I have very, very nice parents who, will like hang out and listen to me for a while, but they are not like on my back about stuff. They are not like pushing me the way that Jennette's mom was pushing her to do everything. In the book, Jennette talks about how her mom had taken her to go get ice cream at some point, and Jennette was like, okay, instead of coconut, I want cookies and cream. And her mom was like, you don't want coconut? But you always get coconut. Oh my god, you're growing up. Oh my god. And she seemed like she was literally going to cry because Jennette picked a different ice cream flavor. And Jennette was like, no, you know what? I changed my mind. I want coconut. And her mom was like, okay. And then like the tears go away. So it's very manipulative, emotional bargaining. And it's fascinating to see that sometimes in our childhood,
maybe we feel displeased about the way that we were raised and say, I wish that a parent was more like this, or they did something like that. But a big part of growing up and growth, when you do manage to have a pretty healthy relationship with your parents, is to understand that parents are just people, and so they make a lot of mistakes. So, reflecting on something like this, you might think, hey, maybe I put too many expectations on my own parents to behave a way that I needed them to behave when they were young people. They didn't know better, and things turned out the way they did, but you can't laud them as gods who have control over the whole universe and then hit that point in your teenage life where you're like, wait a minute, I don't respect any authority or you, and have those two ideas conflate with each other because, you have this person that you respected, you realize that they don't know everything, and then there's this clash of ideals, and suddenly you may not get along with your parents anymore for, a huge number of reasons. All of that being said, with this sort of like whole qualifier out of the way, and also just generally talking about my own experience of, reflecting on my own experiences, Jennette's mom was wild, to say the least. The things that she did were not normal, and the things that she did were not the classic things that you grow up and realize, oh, my parent is just a person and they do something like that. No, this is entirely emotionally manipulative behavior, and it is absurd. Still bathing Jennette when she was 16 because she said, I have to do it. Initially it was so like she could clean her hair best because she was a beautician and she could get her ready for casting calls, but even after she booked iCarly, she was still like, I have to bathe you, which is not appropriate. She would also bathe her with Jennette's older brother too. So like her brother was 16 and she would just be like, oh, I have to bathe both of you because I don't have time because somebody won't get a job around here to support this family. And she would talk about how much she didn't like her husband, which is the father of these children, to the children. They would fight wildly, the parents in the house, including, pulling out a knife and screaming and like flying all over the place. And the children had learned to either block it out by playing a video game and literally not even looking up from the screen, so just escaping into your own world, or in Jennette's case, it's this nervous anxiety to be like, I have to be on my parents' side or they will, have some sort of consequence that is terrible. So she would like side with her mom. So while her mom was attacking her dad, she'd be like, go mom, you got this. Yeah. Because she knew that was what her mom needed. And it's ridiculous the way this woman made everybody else orbit around her. Every time she would use her cancer diagnosis to help get Jennette jobs by playing the pity card on purpose. She'd be like, oh, I'll bring up my cancer and make sure that you can pronounce the exact, thing that happened to me and every procedure that it was, because that will give you more credibility. And then when you say it and you bring it up, you'll play that card and people will definitely give you the job. When she didn't get the job, she'd be screaming on the phone at whoever it was that, they don't know her baby's worth. But really, it was all, coming back to the fact that it was the mom's dream to be an actress, and the fact that her parents never let her do that meant that the only way she could live out through that dream was through Jennette. And Jennette already said, I don't like acting. I don't like this at all. I like writing. I do not like acting. I hate it. I hate being judged by people. I hate being put under these lights with a camera watching me. And now, having been booked on iCarly, she hated having to go out in public and be recognized everywhere she went. Because when you're, a part of a very, very, very well-known TV show, and then you go out and try to live your regular life, everybody knows who you are. So she's like, I can't go to my favorite place, Disneyland, anymore, because everywhere I go, I get recognized, and they had to stop one of the parades because too many people recognized her on the street. And she's like, I know I should feel grateful for this because this is what so many people want, but I hate it. It is so intrusive. There is no privacy. I can't live anything with any sort of resemblance to a regular life, and I hate it. It's horrible. I definitely am enjoying this memoir as much as anyone can for a celebrity memoir that is about terrible experiences that happen to you. Absolutely, there are a number of things in here that are just sort of kind of like horrific events to happen to a young child. And remember that, Jennette started out in this industry as a child actor, trying to get small parts, eventually getting into more of a principal role to get speaking roles and show up in, side roles for little TV shows here and there, until eventually she would book, movies and bigger deals. But some of the things that really jumped out to me were the way that she was forced to perform trauma. So she was told, you have to learn how to cry on command. That's the biggest thing. People will definitely want to book you if you can cry on command. That's very difficult to do. As a person who has tried to cry on command and it's very hard, and instead resorted to just using Vicks VapoRub under your eyes, wildly effective, by the way, I can confirm it's very hard to cry on command. I'm not an actor, but if I wanted to be, I feel like that's a very hard thing to have to learn. The way they would say, hey, Jennette, you need to do this, again, as like a 6 or 7-year-old, was imagine the worst thing possible happening to your family. So she would pick a family member and have to imagine some horrible, terrible trauma happening to them where like they died or they nearly died and then something awful happened. And she basically had to cycle through family members and imagine this terrible thing, and then she would cry. So the problem is not just, okay, I have this thing that I booked and I'm going to have to cry once for that, but it's, no, you have to actually go to the casting calls, which involve, like the people who show up there, they have like that round, and then they have the casting director, so you have to do it again. Then you have to do it on camera, and you have to do it for all the different takes and all the different camera angles. So you're crying over and over and over and over again, constantly, and it has to be a good performance. So a lot of her stuff would be like throwing herself on the ground and like swinging her body around wildly, and everyone was like, wow, how did you learn how to do that? And she's like, I can't say it, but honestly, it's from watching my mom have temper tantrums at home, where she would just flail around wildly and act like, oh, because I didn't get my way, nobody loves or respects me, and everybody mistreats me. It's so horrible. And then she would just like fling herself on the ground. It was not good. After a while, some of those events she became so jaded to, so she would have to switch to a different family member and be like, okay, what if this terrible thing happened to them? And her mom would help her come up with these scenarios to help her with the acting exercise. But the more and more I read about this, the more I'm like, hey, the industry of employing child actors maybe for a long time has just seemed like, that's the way. Like, if you wanted to get into Hollywood, it seems like getting in there as a child is the way to do it, because when you're young, there are fewer expectations on you. You can just get your foot in the door. I assume it's still really hard to book stuff, and from this book, it seems like it is. But, even so, that's kind of easier than just being like, you know what, I'm fresh-faced, I'm 20, I'm gonna just move to LA and see if I can become the next big star right now. I guess I always kind of saw it as like, oh, well, that's how like Selena Gomez and Demi Lovato started out on Barney, and then maybe it was a smooth path from there, because I don't read about child stars. And now reading about it, I'm like, hey, this is a grueling industry. In Jennette's case, her mom booked her for 14 classes of dance per week, on top of also having to do acting class. And she also was homeschooled, which is the only possible way she could have gone to all of these lessons. Plus, she was trying to book calls at the same time and rehearse and do these, acting gigs. So that's incredible. And then basically when Jennette began to go through puberty and she noticed that her breasts were coming in, she asked her mom, what can I do, because I need to still look like a child, so it's easier to book me. I need to look as childlike as possible. And for a moment she had this fear, what if it's cancer? Because it's like, well, this horrible thing happened to her mom, now it's my turn. Her mom was like, well, basically we can put you on a great little, trick well known to me, calorie restriction. So she basically taught Jennette to diet in a very intense and horrible way from the age of like 8 onward. I may have that year a little bit off, but it was a very, very young age. And it's sad to watch the fact that this time goes by and Jennette eats very little, and it totally changes the way that she treats her body and the respect that she gives it in an unconscious way, and it also changes the way that she thinks about other people and the way that other people see her. So I mean, she starts this diet, and of course she loses a lot of weight in a very horrible, unhealthy way. Calorie restriction is basically to obviously restrict the amount of food that you eat, with the intention that you would lose a lot of weight, which is not intended for children. But Jennette is like, well, to make mom happy, what if I lose twice the amount I'm supposed to lose, so I'll accelerate the rate by only eating half of what they want me to eat for the calorie restriction. So she eats even less, and she learns that only certain things are like good treats. So it'll be like, okay, if I have applesauce and if I have an ice pop, then those are good because they basically have no calories in them. And then iced tea's good because you just pee it right out, so then that's like no calories either. That's great. So those are like her 3 treats, and everything else is just lettuce for lunch with no dressing or anything on it, and then for dinner would be like vegetables with no sauce, no seasoning, nothing like that. And that's basically the diet. I'm sure you'd lose a lot of weight on that because you aren't getting any of the good nutrients that you need to have in your body from that diet. That is a horrible diet. That is a horrible suggestion to make to anybody to modify their body with, especially a child. As the more you read about this stuff, the more upsetting it kind of is to see that she did this for so long. Her mother knew about it. They took her to the doctor, and then Jennette feels her mother's disappointment when they weigh her and she's like 2 or 3 pounds heavier than she was at the scale at home. And the doctor says, well, let me speak with the mother privately and say, hey, I think maybe Jennette is anorexic and you should talk to her because she's very, very, very underweight. And she's like, huh, that's so strange. She's been eating totally normal. I'll check with her. And Jennette's like, that's weird because mom definitely checks in with my diet. So what's going on? Because she doesn't really realize that her mom is lying. She's so like far removed from other people. They definitely were not well off. Of course, Jennette books iCarly, which helps to take care of the financial problems, but also introduces a lot of new problems with the famous The Creator that was mentioned, which is a Nickelodeon representative who basically at this point has been unmasked. Dan Schneider, one of the producers for the show, as well as many other shows in Nickelodeon, he has been basically, talked about in different circles about inappropriate behavior with young co-stars. And with this book, this is the unveiling of the truth for Jennette's history with The Creator that she does not name, which I believe she was offered hush money for. It's sort of like this creeping dread because you know with the mother's behavior that she's encouraging whatever happens and saying, hey Jennette, like, yeah, whatever he wants, you have to do it. Just be happy, be smiley, just use a big bright voice and use a lot of hand gestures and just be very, appealing and whatever he wants. But Jennette is noticing the abusive behaviors in The Creator with the way that he will, bring somebody up and make them feel great, but he can also immediately bring that person down and just hit them with this horrible, verbiage that makes them feel terrible about themselves. Like, yeah, there's like a certain amount of, that kind of like tongue-in-cheek, I guess, type of humor of like, hey, everybody's great, but I like you best. That's like, okay, I guess that's okay. But for someone who's kind of two-faced, who's doing that to everybody, it just feels very disingenuous, which I guess is part of what you'd see in the industry a lot, because Jennette says she was so surprised that Miranda Cosgrove, the main star of iCarly, was so nice to her, which is so sad that everybody else was so mean to her, and the fact that she was not was such a shock. I'll say I'm very, very glad that at least Jennette and Miranda were actual friends. They saw each other all the time on set, and then they chatted, and then they would Skype all the time. They would go to see movies, and they genuinely were friends. I'm very, troubled with what's coming next, because I'm now at 40% of the way through the book, and given that at this point The Creator has met with Jennette and said, I will give you a spin-off if you do everything I say, but I can't do the spin-off for at least a few years. iCarly's doing really good, so we're gonna have to wait. So hang out, do every single thing I say, and then I promise I'll give you a spin-off. I mean, I get that, but also like weighing in the ideas that, first of all, I'm giving you a spin-off. Well, you're also giving yourself a huge wad of cash in your pocket because it's your idea, you're going to get paid a bunch of money for doing this, and it only works because it's riding on the idea that Jennette would be into it. Jennette hates fame, but she's only really doing all this because her mom wants it. And if her mom had said, like, hey, you can quit acting, I don't want this for you, I don't want this, and she actually meant it, Jennette would not be acting. And I just feel so sad that Jennette had this whole experience with her mother and with her family not being remotely functional, honestly. It's very sad for... It's very sad to read about. I also, like, am looking at this with, you know, the idea in the back of my mind that every person frames an experience with their own perspective. And so, you know, from Jennette's mom's experience, she probably didn't see everything the same way. But in this case, it's very hard to not think that this is just like the 100% unfiltered truth, and that Jennette's mom was just honestly kind of delusional, and not, even if she didn't see what she was doing to Jennette, some part of her knew what she was doing. You can't emotionally manipulate those people in a way without being aware, and I feel like it's just a complete lack of empathy for a child. Also, like, everybody else's emotions, because she would constantly lie to people, she would make threats, she would just do anything possible to get her way, and it was like a child that never grew up.
Just a quick note, because I'm just thinking about this more. I mentioned, like, oh, you know, I always thought to get into acting you have to start as a child to get in there. Like, I guess that's the way the industry works, but like, it's totally still child labor. And I guess I just never put two and two together that cleanly because I just don't think about that stuff, but that's 100% child labor. And when I'm thinking now, because I just started another chapter about how Jennette was saying when her mom was like, oh, I'm too tired to wake up and go to church, and Jennette is really more of like, you know, the responsible person in this house, where she wakes up early and like tries to get her mom up, and she will make her mom like a cup of tea and then try to wake her up with the cup of tea and be like, we have to go in 20 minutes or we're gonna be late. And her mom's like, well, I've worked so hard. She's thinking like, well, it must be hard because she has to drive me back and forth. But also, she then just gets to sit in my dressing room for hours and like read magazines, and I have to do my homework, learn all of my lines on the way in the car, and then I need to perform on set for 10 hours straight, and then I go home. So actually, I kind of feel like I am doing a lot of work, but I'm still here and I'm still ready to go to church in the morning. So, I mean, it's just sad to see like how quickly Jennette had to grow up. And I guess that's just the part that I wanted to add, is that, you know, it's 100% sad to see somebody have to become an adult faster and sometimes sort of like outgrow, you know, childhood at such an accelerated rate where they almost can't go back. There's a point in the memoir where Jennette talks with her grandpa, and her grandpa says, I wish you could just be a kid. You deserve to just be a kid and have fun. And she's like, fun is not a concept that I'm that familiar with. Because she's been hustling and busting her ass every day for a dream that she doesn't want. I don't know. I mean, like, obviously, thinking about it generally, it's sad, but just the more and more that you think about it, the more you are in Jennette's mind and seeing what her mother has placed on her for her own aspirations that she never achieved. It just is even more heartbreaking.
I'm so tired. We just came back from eating dim sum, which you might have been able to tell from the previous clip. And as always, we eat way too much. Everybody else is sleeping. But I figured I would come and tell you some thoughts I had. First, I was listening to the book while I was doing a bunch of Sudoku puzzles, so all my notes and annotations are on my Sudoku puzzle, so please forgive me for having to constantly check over here in like the little guidelines of my puzzle. So some of these aren't going to make sense. So I have Hawaii Paparazzi. Oh, okay. Yes, I remember this now. Okay. I thought this said Hawaii Pepperoni. It's Hawaii Paparazzi. There's a period of time for Jennette when she and the rest of the cast of iCarly was given as a wrap gift the like trip to Hawaii with her and one guest. So she had been dating this guy named Joe, and they were secretly going, basically. Her mom didn't know, her family didn't know, and she was keeping it a secret because she knew that her mom would flip out. So, of course, some paparazzi saw them, took pictures, and her mom found out, and she was unhinged. She posted all of this stuff on like an iCarly fan page where she was like, I'm gonna steal all your fans and I'm gonna start making Vine videos and I'm gonna be so funny and I'm gonna steal all of your fans, which is ridiculous. She called her like 30 something times and screamed at her and yelled at her, and she was just so horrible. She emailed all this stuff where it was like, you're a terrible daughter, you're the reason that I have cancer, you did all this stuff to me, you're a whore, you're a slut, you're terrible, P.S. send fridge money, ours broke. Which made me laugh because I was like, are you serious? Do you hear yourself? You are absolutely like horribly abusing Jennette in general, and then just sending her this horribly verbally abusive email, and in the end you're like, by the way, send me money. Ridiculous. Afterwards, she was like, I want you to sing You Are the Wind Beneath My Wings, and she kept making Jennette practice this for her funeral, which was like, practice trauma. It's like pre-grieving for something that hasn't yet happened yet. But again, it's a way of her mom centering everything in everyone's lives around her again. So it's like, I'm going to die and I want you to sing a song at my funeral, so this is how you're allowed to grieve for me, and here's how I want you to do it, and I want you to just keep practicing. And Jennette's like, this song's not even in my vocal range, and she's like, well, just try it, just sing it, and she gets her to like keep practicing it and singing it over and over and over again all the time, which of course has the horrible connection that it's going to be sung at her mom's funeral. Wendy's for, oh yes, okay, so also she's like, I want to go to Wendy's for my birthday, and she does this as a way to be extra humble, as a show of humility to everybody else. It's like, even on my birthday, even as the cancer patient that I am, I just wanted to go to Wendy's because that's just the kind of person that I truly am, and who I am and what I stand for, and it's just a lot of like performance for the sake of, again, attention. It's extremely narcissistic. And Jennette was like, I bought this specific apartment that I had because all the other apartments on this other side are facing the big iCarly thing with my stupid face on the thing that's like, hey, it's me, Sam Puckett. And she's like, I hate being known as Sam Puckett. I hate it now. I get approached in public and everyone's like, hey Sam, oh my god, Buttersock, ha ha ha. And she just has to be like, yep, good one. Oh, ha ha, that's so funny. And it's the only way she's known. She's not even considered to be a person. And more that I read with this book, it just really exposes the horrors of this, because it's literally child labor. It really is. I never really understood that before this book. I guess I just never considered how difficult that is, especially as a child, that you are expected to perform the way that you need to in Hollywood in an adult's world. You're playing an adult's game. Jennette's very, focused on this, and knowing that, like, she is very much part of the face of iCarly, and she sees herself everywhere. She can't live a normal life. Around 60% of the way through the book, she kind of circles back to the very beginning where they had that moment in the hospital, and she was telling her mom, like, hey, I dropped to my ideal weight according to you, which is after rounds and rounds of anorexia, which became bulimia, and she has this, very intense eating disorder, and it's just bad. And I think now that we've spent so much time, reading Jennette's story, it really has much more of an impact to me. Even though it still seemed like a serious issue at the beginning of the book, I see how, intense that was, and why she thought, like, this is going to be the thing that wakes my mom up, because that's really what she cares about. And genuinely, it is, like, really all that her mom cared about. Also, Jennette did end up with, other than just the very graphic descriptions of an eating disorder, a lot of drinking problems, too, where she would drink a lot. She was saying drinking every night for 3 weeks at the very beginning, and also falling into patterns where she didn't really want to be connected with anyone romantically because she saw love as vulnerability, and it's just easier not to be in love and not to, be close to anybody. So that's very interesting, because yeah, I think like when you've been deeply traumatized and abused and hurt, and especially in ways that you don't recognize that, and I think also because she never had the space to recognize that, being in the public eye, being scrutinized for anything that you do anyway, she probably wasn't able to learn things the way that a lot of us have, where we can kind of like go online and just search up like, hey, is it normal for this thing to happen? But if you're a celebrity, it's like, what's normal for you anyway? And when something happens, everyone in this industry is like, you're such a good sport, thanks for dealing with it. And you're just sort of given this positive reinforcement that like, oh, this is the way it is, because why would they tell you otherwise? They want you to do your job. So it's very sad that, after this abusive pattern, she doesn't realize in that moment that this is wrong and that this isn't right. And of course, then you don't feel like you can trust anybody because you've been disappointed and hurt so often. It's sad, man. It's really sad. It's really sad. Oh, also there's a point where she talks about the show Sam and Cat that she was on with Ariana Grande. Obviously, people know Ariana Grande now as a famous pop star singer, and at the time she was still just an actress on the TV show Victorious, and then they joined together for Sam and Cat. But of course, Ariana is also taking off in this world of stardom, while Sam is just recognized as like, hey, oh my god, the buttersock girl, ha ha ha, and everyone just makes jokes. Which also, by the way, is super fucked up, is that like her character was known for loving food when she obviously had this terrible problem with an eating disorder where she couldn't eat correctly. Like she would just either not eat anything, or she would binge a lot of food and throw it up. Which she originally thought of as like the best of both worlds. So the fact that she's struggling so much with this, and her character is known for like, oh my god, I love fried chicken and I eat this and I eat da 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 da, and like that's her personality trait, and that's of course then what people call out to her in the streets. It's pretty fucked. So her seeing her co-star just soar to fame to the degree that like they will just write Ariana out of episodes, to the degree where she was like, I'm acting and I'm not allowed to be written out of episodes for anything that I have to do. So I am acting alongside literally a box. They decided that Sam and Kat, the characters, Kat being Ariana's character, was just in a box for one whole episode because she had to go and do like press for her tour or whatever it was. So it's like, I'm literally acting with a box. This is fucking ridiculous. Also, she was told that she would direct, and they non-surprisingly did not really let her do that. Then she sort of lost all interest in this entire world. Like, it's also very sad to see that, because for someone in that position, your whole life has centered around acting up till this point of like 17 years of your life, and most of it having spent learning how to act and do stuff like that. And then what career is left for you if not acting? And if you decide that you hate that, you don't like that, she knew that from a very early age, and she just continued for her mom's sake. What is left for you? I'm so glad that Jennette actually went on to go write this book, and I hope she becomes more of a prolific writer that's more well known, and she can just write, even if she just wants to write books, or if she wants to move into like writing movies and scripts, which she also had done for some time. I hope she's happy, because really she's been through a lot, and yeah, I seriously, I really feel for her with everything that's happened. And the things that I've heard about her family now from this book are also quite depressing and sad, not just with her mom, but also issues with her grandmother being very verbally abusive, and also her dad dropping a huge bombshell. My jaw was on the ground. I really liked this quote that Jennette says. She says, "Through the years, I've slowly learned that the entertainment business is one where what's being said is rarely what's being talked about. This way of operating not only disagrees with me, but seems genuinely impossible for me to adapt to. Everyone else seems so able to position things discreetly and choreograph their phrasing, so the heartbeat of what's being said is delicately danced around." And this is in reference to the hush money that she received. I think before I said 200,000, it was actually 300,000. And the fact that she was being offered this, and she was like, this is hush money. And they were like, no, think of it as a reward. And they did their best to not say what this quite was, but she was like, no, this is straight up hush money, I'm not accepting this. And I respect her for having those kinds of morals. She talks about how she feels that the entertainment industry robbed her of her youth, of normal adolescence where everything wasn't critiqued, discussed, and ridiculed. And she, again, hated being known as Sam, and it's sad because she was Sam because of this TV show that she did as a kid. And, when you're a kid, you will do whatever people say because you are in an adult's world, and they'll say, like, go stand over there and go do something kind of stupid. That's what your character would do, and you just do it. And that's what you become known for because it's a famous, popular show. Jennette says, imagine being famous for something you did when you were 13. These are supposed to be the years where you stumble, fall, and you tuck these things under the rug. Child acting is dystopian. And you just don't realize that you are being taken advantage of. Some of these concepts come up again and again, just from a perspective of like understanding your own trauma or parts of your mental health that haven't been given the proper amount of attention. So in Jennette's case, she was also dealing with OCD, which she thought of as the Holy Spirit speaking to her because of her Mormon upbringing. She has, this concept from early in life that she was keeping her mom alive by wishing on her cake for her mom to live another year. And it's quite sad to think that, you are spending your birthday wish, which is really just a thing to like be like, I'm hopeful for something in the new year. What's something that would make me happy? And you're allowed to be selfish about it. It's not even really selfish. You're just wanting something for yourself. And every year she spends it on saying, I want my mom to live one more year. And when her friends bring a cake for her birthday, when she's like 22, I think, she's just like, I'm devastated to see this because, like, what am I supposed to wish for? I already know, like, my mom's dying and there's nothing I can do. She does this whole thing where she reads a bunch of self-help in a week. She decides, like, I'm going to focus on myself, and this is, going to have some great impact on me. Hopefully that's helpful for her, because she says, I spent the years that you're supposed to spend finding yourself spent pretending to be other people. But some of that stuff that's, like, self-help guru bullshit. It's not helpful. It's just used as a marketing tactic to get people to buy the product of either the book or the program that somebody sells to improve their life, because there's no greater reward you can offer somebody than the perfect life, because it's different for every person. And it's the idea that you will achieve your dreams, you will have the perfect, whatever you imagine, if you just do whatever I say. And so often those self-help books are just straight up bullshit. So she does end up working with therapy for a therapist named Laura. And I thought this was so interesting because this is exactly the same way that I've approached therapy in the past, of like, I'm planning my opener. I need to start out on a light note. I don't want to be like another sad sack that shows up in the office and gives my terrible life story and makes the therapist regret their degree in therapy. That's like pretty much what she says in the book. And I was like, this is exactly the way I've always approached therapy. I went to therapy in college when it was free. And I've been thinking about going again. Honestly, this book might be the thing that makes me go back to therapy, because the amount of stuff in this book that I'm relating to in, like, even in small ways are staggering. I have struggled with some of the things that Jennette has struggled with, and I don't think it's necessary for me to have struggled to the same degree to recognize that they are things that I would like to still process and work through. So, interesting. I wrote in my notes, will this book convince me to get therapy? And I think the answer is yes. Like, doing the elevator pitch of trauma to her therapist, again, so relatable. And then her therapist brings up the idea of a life wheel. I don't really know what that is, but she says it's supposed to be a benchmark to track the progress. I definitely got a weird vibe from Laura, the therapist, in this part of the book, because I just wasn't sure, like, are we on her side? Is she bullshit? Like, because she's kind of like a life coach person, and I don't know much about life coaches, but I just don't know if that has anything to do with actual, like, DBT or the DSM-5 or like anything like that, or if it's just like, work out and eat certain things and everything will be great. Like, yeah. The therapist is like, tell me about your childhood, tell me about your mom. She's like, what do you mean? Mom was perfect, everything was perfect, my childhood was totally normal. And I wonder, if she just really didn't know that isn't normal, that having to sleep on these basically like yoga mats on the ground because the whole house is just full of clutter and you have nowhere to have space, and your mom is everywhere at all times and you only are away from each other for about 3 hours at a time, is not normal. If there's any book to convince you that maybe fame is not everything it's always been cracked up to be by everybody else, this might be the book to do that. This whole thing with her boyfriend Joe, and he's like, I've been praying about it and I think we shouldn't have sex anymore, and I'm going to be honest with you, I think I'm Jesus Christ incarnate. And I'm like, bro, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Jennette is like really going through it. There's so many things going on. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about every single detail in this book, but it's so hard not to want to talk about this book because there's just so many things in here which are, just like, attention grabbing, and it shocks you, and you feel, it's inflammatory writing because you just feel for her and you want her to have a better life, and I'm sad that it wasn't better yet. So I have very little left of the book. I only have like 10% of the book left to go, so I'm going to definitely finish it today, and I will wrap things up after this little clip. So cool. I'm gonna go book shopping now. Bye.
That's my favorite, just to do it once a day.
Hi, I'm here to wrap up this vlog because I never do my vlog wrap up things, like where I end the vlog here, and I'm ready to do that and get a little bit of closure with you about the end of this memoir, because woof. I feel like ever since finishing this book and then looking up some other things online about what other people think about the memoir, I've just been seeing the same adjectives over and over again, which I mostly agree with. Like, it's explosive, it's shocking, it reveals so many secrets, all these people knew about this thing that was happening and nobody did anything, or whatever it was. And I think, mostly I agree with the idea of, this is a very shocking memoir and worth your time, and you should probably pick it up if you can handle the content inside of it, if you aren't comfortable with the trigger warnings that are associated with this book. But at the same time, I don't really think that this is a book that should be confined to the space that so many celebrity memoirs are, where they just say like, oh, it was shocking because, ooh, it was so juicy. And really, like, no, not really. I mean, this is a book about a woman's trauma from childhood until adulthood, and dealing with it in a very public space, and having to remain this very, very mature, responsible persona in place of the mother who wasn't really behaving much like a mother for her. Twisted and kind of ironic to see what her character was meant to do compared to the struggle she was actually dealing with at the time. And I can't imagine how triggering it must have been to be dealing with an eating disorder and then be the character that's so associated with food and have to eat food on set all the time. And this was entirely a reaction that was encouraged by her mother, who was doing so to help her get ahead in an industry which Jennette was never really that interested in being involved in. It's just sort of like this huge snowball effect, like that little domino meme with narcissistic personality disorder, and then like a fantastic memoir, but at what cost? So I mean, my heart completely goes out to Jennette, and I really feel for her and am very appreciative of her vulnerability in, bringing this to light, talking about her trauma very openly and expressing it in ways that were very digestible and, easy to read, but also important to read, which is an interesting line to have to toe when you are still kind of in the public eye. But I think for her, she benefits from not really being in the same position of, I'm still creating movies and people need to come and watch my movie and this is a publicity stunt and blah, 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 that people will be subjected to, if you do something at the same time as anything else that you're doing. So, I'm glad that, she was able to come forth with this and be taken seriously. I do feel bad because I have been watching some of the interviews with her that people just sort of, cut right to the thing of like, why'd you call the memoir this? And like, why would you say that about your mom? And, it's clear that if you haven't read the book, you may feel that way. But, if someone's taken this time to not only write a book, which is hard, but expose these very deeply personal vulnerabilities with an audience, I feel like it would be unjust to not read it. I don't know, maybe,
It's that stellar idea that people actually do the things that they say that they do, but maybe the people who do talk shows and stuff like don't actually read the book. I don't know. They're missing out on a really, really fantastic book. So I'm definitely looking for whatever Jennette does next. I think I'm going to be going back and, trying to see some of the things that she has done. I know that she's directed and written some short films that have won some awards, and some others that are maybe not as publicized because she's always known as the iCarly character Sam. Really hope that, she finds peace and she seems to be in a much better place with her current situation than she was during the events that are mostly written about in the book. So that makes me happy that at least things are, somewhat, moved in a direction of healing for her, because she deserves that. That being said, there are a few things that I learned from this experience. This is a memoir about Jennette, so this is not about me. However, there were some things that I read about that I found relatable. I've struggled with some things that I just don't really talk about publicly. And it's a moment of self-examination to look at something that other people say, like, oh my god, this is so horrible that this happened to somebody, and you just go like, this was really relatable. And other people maybe don't feel the same way. So I know sometimes trauma kind of invests itself in such a way that you don't see it for what it is, the same way that Jennette thought that she lived a completely 100% normal life. I've definitely examined the fact that I didn't have the most normal experience in certain aspects that I found relatable, but also I guess I don't want anybody to worry. I genuinely did not have terrible problems. Please don't worry. I'm fine. I'm coping. I'm good. However, all that being said, I did get 2 books out about therapy. Number 1 is Therapy 101, and number 2 is Dialectical Behavioral Therapy for Dummies. So I figure I'm going to read these books. This is not part of the vlog, but I'm going to be maybe spending some time with these books and spending some time thinking about maybe seeing a therapist. I think it's okay. It's perfectly healthy to do such a thing. Do not have a sponsor like BetterHelp to plug right now, but, I actually think I would prefer to maybe see somebody in person. It's perfectly healthy to think about your mental health and to think about the things that affect it and how to find peace, because you deserve it. This was not a super eye-opening thing of oh my god, do I need therapy now? It just was September is much more convenient for me to get therapy than August was, because I was very busy and stressed. Therapy doesn't always come at the time that it's most convenient. Stress usually comes at the time when it's least convenient, and I think I want to prepare myself for things before they happen, just in general. So I think this book was excellent. I highly recommend it to anybody who can stomach the content inside of it, being that there are very, very graphic descriptions of things like eating disorders, specifically anorexia and bulimia, and parental domestic abuse, and a few other topics as well. So I highly recommend this book. I really liked it. Full 5 stars from me. I think this book maybe helped me get therapy. And this was also my 100th book of the year, which was very exciting for me. I had a goal for the year to read 200 books, and then I was like, maybe not this year. So 150 it was, and now I've hit 100, and it's just about the beginning of September. So that's very exciting. That's all I have to say for now. Thanks for watching. I'm Rachel. This is Let Me in the Library, and I'll see you next time. Bye.